what's going on up there could be the most important event in history. You're talking about physical contact and proof from another system, another planet, another intelligence. That's got to be the biggest event in history, period.
Within the heat of the Nevada desert is a place shrouded in mystery, where truth and fiction bleed into each other. Hardly anything is known by the common person about this place called Area 51. That is, until today. This is the story of Bob Lazar, a man who claims to have worked, researched, and reverse-engineered alien technology at a top-secret government facility called S4, just south of the famed Area 51. His incredulous account has surprised audiences all over the world for decades. Lazar's statements are astounding, to say the least. He claims to be in possession of classified information about recovered alien technology, including documents and records of alien involvement in human affairs spanning more than 10,000 years, and a new element addition to the periodic table, element 115. This element, according to him, is the key to the propulsion mechanism used by these extraterrestrial vehicles.
They had 9 craft altogether. I only got hands-on with one of them, so I can't really say what how the others operated. At one time, and only one time, the bay doors that between the hangars were all open, and I could see all the way through. They were all different. There was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system.
Bob Lazar described in detail his employment at S4, a purported secret underground facility near Area 51, the top secret military base in a corner of the Nevada test site. Lazar claimed he worked on a retrieval project involving crashed alien spacecraft there. He claimed to have been shown up to 9 crashed or captive flying discs of possible extraterrestrial origin stored in a hangar cut into a mountainside. The craft used an element, 115, that did not exist anywhere on Earth for its gravity-harnessing propulsion and could not possibly have been synthesized on this planet due to its weight. It had to have come from a place where naturally occurring super-heavy elements could be synthesized. He also said that the United States government had obtained about 500 pounds of the element in question from the recovered craft. Lazar spoke about the recovered craft in great detail, including facts about their saucer-shaped design, their use of an anti-gravity propulsion system powered by element 115, which allegedly generates a gravity wave that allows the vehicle to fly and escape visual detection by bending light around it. He also talked about the strange materials they were constructed from. He described one of them, which he named the Sport model, as having the metal consistency of liquid titanium. He claimed that in the process of reverse engineering the aircraft, when it was dismantled, the reactor he studied was topped by a sphere or semi-sphere, which emitted a force field capable of repulsing human flesh.
It produced a gravitational field of its own. Now, this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity. But there's no machine we can have that turns on that makes gravity. Like, you can turn on an electromagnet and it makes a magnetic field. We can't make a gravitational field. Anyway, this device was producing that. And Barry said, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like 2 like poles of a magnet.
Lazar claimed in the interview that the seats of the saucer he had seen were around the size of a toddler, and that he had seen alien cadavers of a similar size. He claimed to have seen what seemed to be 2 men in lab coats facing down and conversing with something small with long arms. When he momentarily peered through a door window while strolling along a hallway at S4. 30 years later, he said that he did not believe he had seen an extraterrestrial, but that he had seen a dummy that had been used to gauge the size of the supposed aliens, who they called the kids at the base. Lazar said he was fired from his job at the clandestine military base because he sneaked some of his friends into the desert near Area 51 one evening to surreptitiously watch a saucer being test flown. A Lincoln County deputy caught the group leaving the area, and the deputy ratted Lazar out to the authorities. He claims that after his employment was terminated, his records and work at S4 had been scrubbed clean. Around the time of his expose, there had been persistent and ongoing reports of strange lights over the test site, possible sightings of aircraft maneuvering in ways that violated the laws of aerodynamics. Lazar's claims sent shockwaves through the community and the world at large. They sparked heated discussions, with skeptics questioning the veracity of his tales and believers hailing him as a whistleblower of historic proportions. His detailed explanations and seemingly credible background lent an air of legitimacy to his story. However, with all of the attention that was now focused on him and his story, doubts quickly surfaced, and his critics began to question his credibility. The U.S. Air Force categorically denied the existence of S4 or any program involving the use of recovered alien technology. Lazar's detractors point to discrepancies in his educational background and employment history. Institutions such as Caltech and MIT, where Lazar claimed to have studied, had no record of him ever attending. In 1990, about a year after his initial TV interview, Lazar found himself criminally charged for his role in the operation of what the prosecution called an illegal, high-tech brothel. That, on its own, considerably damaged whatever credibility he had left. His claims concerning his work history were also debunked. He had said he was a former scientist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, the site of the Manhattan Project. He also said he was hired because of his work on a jet engine Honda that made headlines and attracted the attention of Edward Teller, a theoretical physicist at Los Alamos at the time. Teller then gave Lazar the chance to work at EG&G, a covert company that was contracted by the U.S. government and assigned to S4. Bob Lazar was not listed as employed by Los Alamos. The sole document that was accessible was the phone book kept by the lab, which listed him as a contract worker employed by Kirk Mayer, a lesser supplier of the lab's electrochemical engines. Lazar may therefore have been able to enter the laboratory as a member of the Kirk Mayer staff, but probably not as a scientist. This would explain how he was aware of EG&G and S4, which were at the time classified materials not available to the public, but later confirmed by the U.S. government. Lazar presented one of the few bits of physical evidence of his employment at a covert base in Nevada as his case progressed through the court system. It was a W-2 form paid to him by the Department of Naval Intelligence, and it showed an income of less than $1,000. The authenticity of the form itself was called into question. The Department of the Navy does have an Office of Naval Intelligence, but not a Department of Naval Intelligence, as skeptics pointed out. In 2003, Russian scientists discovered element 115, a synthetic radioactive element. It was added to the periodic table in 2013. However, this element, also known as moscovium, is not the same thing as the one Lazar claimed to have discovered. According to him, that element could power alien spacecraft without concerns for gravity. So far, no use has been found for moscovium, the highly radioactive element with a half-life of less than a second and thus decays very quickly.
Element 115, the fuel they had, was stable. In other words, it didn't decay. It wasn't emitting radioactivity. When they synthesized the 2 or 3 atoms of the 115, it did decay, and it was not a stable element.
In 2017, Lazar's workplace was raided by the FBI and local police, which led Lazar followers to believe the mission was to recover element 115. When he was asked directly whether he had it in his possession, he declined, saying if he did, he would not be willing to share that information. The said raid was part of a murder investigation in order to ascertain whether his company sold thallium to a suspect in Michigan, according to documents obtained through a Freedom of Information request. Despite the criticism and attempts by skeptics and the government to silence him, Bob Lazar has maintained his story for over 30 years. He still runs a scientific equipment business and leads a relatively normal life. He even published his autobiography, Dreamland, in 2019. However, the suspicion surrounding S4 and his purported involvement in decoding extraterrestrial technology persists and continues to follow him. Lazar's incredible story has not only survived over 30 years, it continues to thrive. In 2018, Jeremy Corbell, a filmmaker, made a documentary that brought his story back into the spotlight. After being featured on the extensively watched Netflix documentary Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, Lazar was invited onto the Joe Rogan podcast, which is arguably the most popular podcast globally.
If you have a machine that makes gravity, you can pretty much do anything. You can affect time. You can have force fields. All that stuff that's in science fiction becomes reality if you have a machine that can make gravity. And what we worked on in the desert was a machine that makes gravity.
According to the New York Times in 2020, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, which had been set up to investigate unidentified flying objects and was thought to have been disbanded, was still up and running full operations under the auspices of the Office of Naval Intelligence. This revelation made headlines worldwide, and once again, the possibility of the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, has reignited the age-old debate. The implications of Lazar's story are profound. If true, it would mean that the government has been hiding the existence of extraterrestrial life from the public for decades. The government has consistently denied Lazar's claims, stating that he never worked at Area 51 or any other classified facility. They have dismissed his story as mere fiction and have even gone to considerable lengths to discredit him. But if Lazar's claims are false, then why has the government gone to such lengths to silence him? Is the government secretly reverse engineering flying saucers? And if so, why are they hiding it? I believe that the government is hiding something incredibly big and potentially life-changing from us, the people, for their own benefit. Their reaction to Bob's claims hints at guilty behavior as they tried their very best to silence him.
U.S. intelligence knew that some of these ETs were being housed on Groom Lake area, particularly in a place called S2 Annex. We've already verified hundreds and hundreds of people that were there, that claimed they were there, and they were there. We can verify it, including Bob Lazar.
Do you think they're still working on those things at that facility?
Yes. They spent too much time and effort and money to build this massive underground facility.
Yeah, to walk away from.
To just walk away from it. There's so much in open source documents out there on the internet, Googling certain things, or even looking in Black Vault about the subject.
Yeah, well, true, absolutely. But some people don't get the option to be able to see some of this from the inside, looking out.
Right.
And you've had some of that.
I have the ability to look sometimes. Well, I did in the past. Had the ability to look in and see what was going on inside the government pertaining to space. We're going to talk about the Men in Black.
Now, I'm interested in Men in Black, because, for us in the UK, Men in Black really used to mean one thing, the old traditional 1960s and 70s American-style Men in Black incidents. We've had a few like that in the UK. There was a spate in the 1970s in southern Wales, the Ripperston Farm incident and Broadhaven. A lot of strange craft being seen. Men in Black, the traditional, unusual Men in Black turned up, apparently ended up driving up to the farmhouse. The owner of the house was washing and cleaning outside windows, and she turned around and realized the car was there and they were there, and they drove over a gravel path that made no noise, and they looked very unusual, and persistent questions being asked about what she'd seen, and maybe not disclosing that. We've had accounts like that. I suppose it's more so associated in America. Do we still get modern day accounts of Men in Black incidents?
There are some recently, and one particular one in Watertown, New York, a couple years ago, where a couple saw something driving from the Canadian border south. Watertown's only a few, but 60 miles south of the border, and they saw something, took some pictures of it. The next morning, they woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning with these two men on their doorsteps saying, you took some photographs last night. We need to see those photographs because you violated National Security Act because it's classified what you took pictures of.
How did they know they took the photographs? This is the biggest mystery of all.
How did they know that these two people did that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's the same story all around the world. I mean, even in the UK, people have witnessed objects in the sky and things, and then come till next morning, there they are. And we think, well, how did they get the resources to know that they actually did that? These are two people traveling in a vehicle at night on their own on a country road. And they take the photograph. There's nobody around to know they're taking that photograph. No. And this is one of the most mysterious things of all. It's like that paranormal aspect of the phenomena.
Exactly.
There's just no answers. Of course, there is that also trouble that are we also dealing with, when we say men in black, government men in black, or the unusual men in black as opposed to the phenomena.
Well, I'm going to tell you in one episode, the real men in black. And the real men in black that I'm going to talk about operate out of this 7602nd Air Intelligence Wing out of Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And they're a unique group of people who have various specialties. And when it comes to extracting information from people, either covertly or clandestinely or in the open, wittingly, they're the best to do it. And so during the Blue Book days, the men in black operate out of that agency.
Well, it's interesting because I was trying to figure out who came first, the unusual paranormal aspects of the men in black, they're really unusual beings, come along. They're kind of pretending to look a little bit like humans, but these little things that gives them away isn't normal. There's been quite a number of accounts of them. Or government men in black. I mean, is it just a phenomenon, copying us, mimicking us, or do you think that they proceed that, government men in black programs came after?
Right.
Because they must have known about some of these issues.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to explain some of that in this presentation and that presentation. And I'm also going to talk about some incidents that involved men in black that we couldn't connect to our government. Okay. It's going to be an interesting episode that will explain some things that most people don't know about.
But it's what's really strange is it's as if they had the same agenda, that they didn't want this information out. You shouldn't really have seen what you've seen, and we don't want that information to go anywhere. And that's quite an unusual thing to do if it is the phenomena. If it's something untoward is actually happening there, then why would they go to such effort to do such things?
Well, it hasn't changed over the years. From the first incident of 1952, some people report seeing something land, flying. 2 men, or actually 3 men showed up, strange-looking people. 1952. Now we jump ahead to 2021, where this couple's driving in upstate New York. 6 hours after they took some pictures, somebody's knocking at the door asking for the same thing. Yeah, 6 hours later. Well, from 2,300 hours.
It's not even processed, probably.
Yeah, we took that somewhere between 11 and 12 o'clock at night.
And is this on a mobile phone device, or is this?
No, this was actually a camera, a digital camera.
Oh, right, digital.
So they hadn't even looked at this picture. So what these men in black wanted, and what these people gave to them, was the SIM card out of the camera.
It's probably one of the most profound things is how they know these things. It's as if they're aware of actions that they shouldn't be aware of, which you could say, okay, is it some form of remote viewing? Are they associated with the craft? Because the only ones that would have known that they may have taken a photograph are those that are occupying the craft and taking a photograph.
Right. And now I'm not saying that the craft was extraterrestrial. It could have been.
Okay.
The terrestrial craft could have been a research and development craft being tested by the United States or Canada. And they did, in fact, take a picture of a highly classified research and development craft.
Wow.
So these men, although they didn't flash real clear credentials to these people, they were scared enough to give them the SIMS card.
Well, yes, there are a few cases where the people who they are talking with don't seemingly act as they normally would do under the normal circumstances, as if it was, say, a government gentleman that turned up to ask questions. We have a very interesting incident that took place here in the UK, and in fact a stone throw from here, from this location here in Bolton in Manchester, where a young girl who was driving home one night from work witnessed a close encounter type experience. It was above her car, and she went on the following day to explain that some guys turned up, and she explained that her father would never, he was always anti anybody, very defensive of his daughter and busybodies. He didn't like that sort of thing. And he was so willingly opened the door to them, allowed them to come into the home and interrogate her. And she said to him, she was sat there looking over at her father as if as a plea to help. And he just was not there. He was just allowing the guys just to completely interrogate her for quite some time before they left. And afterwards, she just couldn't understand, why did you act like that? He was just so strange. And we do have those things reported where there's this strange psychology going on, as if they're forced into giving them, willing them whatever they can do. Come in, you want to talk to my daughter, like, no problem, and that's what was really unusual. I was only a stone throw from here several years back, and a gentleman called Arthur Tomlinson, I believe, investigated it, and it appeared in the Men in Black book that Jenny Randalls had wrote as one of the case files. I've only ever come into one of those cases just by chance, and that was up here in Bolton as well, funny enough, in the Winter Hill area, where a gentleman claimed he'd seen something. And in this case, the MAFF were not those type of men in black, but men, government men in black, but they were from the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Foods, not the Ministry of Defence. Because it was a farm, they seemed to have a bit more clout, the MAFF, than the MOD. Because farmers don't get into all the MOD stuff. But the MAF, oh yes, they're responsible for shutting down farms. And they appeared up the next day. They knew that the cattle hand had seen this object. How they knew, we do not know. We tried to get up there before them, but their resources must be a lot better than our resources. And like I say, we do get those strange incidents, where you can say, okay, they are official things that are happening, and also not so official things that are happening, which might be responsible for the phenomenon. I mean, even Dan Aykroyd is claimed to have experienced seeing them on one occasion, didn't he? So, which was fascinating. So, what other topics are there in the 31 episode? And that's a lot of episodes. Did we get into the secret space program? Yeah.
We're going to talk about the secret space program. We're going to talk about my connections to the Men in Black, how I actually had interfaced with the Men in Black out of a agency that I didn't really, a section of an agency I didn't really know about. Oh. While during my investigation, they came in to interview somebody that I was conducting an investigation on. And so they somewhat interfered with it. They actually took over the investigation.
Oh, so they had the higher priority.
I didn't think so, but I found out back then that they did. And so, and we knew where they came from.
What sort of high priority could that be? How far up that chain does it go? If you're a CIA agent, if you're an FBI agent, who are these guys, and at what level would they be roughly?
Well, they were within U.S. intelligence, same as I was, but in a different branch. And I'm going to go into details of what they told me.
Oh, interesting!
Why they took over.
No giveaways here, folks.
I won't give it away. And I'm going to talk about past cases that I investigated. Abduction cases.
Oh, fantastic!
A couple of abduction cases.
So, what about ETs? Are you aware of ET existence? Are they have you ever come across any evidence to support the existence of these things? Did the government really have these entities, or any of them?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 5 species of ETs that I knew about. Oh. That back in my time period when I was briefed into the program, they talked about 5 particular races of ETs that had visited Earth. The Greys, the Ebens, the Tranthaloids, the Hepaloids, the Quataloids. And I'm going to go into a little bit of details about them and an incident involving one of them. We knew U.S. intelligence knew that some of these ETs were being housed on Groom Lake area, particularly in a place called S2 Annex, which is north,
Annex, okay.
which is north of Papoose Lake.
Is that like the S4 facility like Bob Lazar talks about, or is that a different location?
The S4 facility was at the S2 facility. Bob Lazar talks about S4. Actually, S4 was under S2. It was the fourth level under S2.
Okay.
And when I spoke to him, I kind of directed him, straightened him out, so to speak, because he was talking about S4. We can't get to S4 without going through S2. That's the administrative control area for S4. I've been to S2, but I've never been to S4, so I didn't have a clearance to go down.
And is that, as he describes, in the side of a mountain? Or
yes, exactly. It's that Papoose Lake area.
Right.
A dry lake bed, a mountain just northeast of the dry lake bed. That's exactly where it's at.
Right.
Now, back in those days, you had to drive to it. You could do two different entrances.
Yeah, they're on a coach or bus or some sort.
Right.
Yeah.
Blackened out windows.
Yeah.
But today, there's a highway from Area 51, 16 miles underground to Papoose Lake.
Oh,
so
all the way there discreetly.
It's very discreet.
Are they still flying them in? Janet Airlines?
Yes. Janet Airlines still flying people in from Vegas.
Right.
And a few from Salt Lake City.
They've had that contract for a long time, haven't they?
Yes, they have. It's owned by the CIA.
Well, yeah.
They don't run out of money.
No, they don't. Well, that's interesting, yeah, because there's a lot of people that come to me and say, you know what, I'm still a little bit thinking about Bob's story. You know, how true is it? And of course, he's been a little more vocal over the last few years, as we know. And it's kind of resurfaced again, you know, that argument against is he or isn't he? And I think somebody seemingly went to some great length to try and make it look like he hadn't. Did you ever find any evidence of him being there?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We have recently, my group of retired intelligence officers, we got a entry control log for Groom Lake Complex, including Area 51, Papoose Lake, and Southern Test Range, which is the area south.
And what sort of person would you have to be to have access to all those?
You had to work there.
You'd have to work there.
Yeah. And this control log is from January 1st of 1979 to December 31st of 1990. So anybody had access during that time period is on that log. We've already verified hundreds and hundreds of people that were there, that claimed they were there, and they were there. We can verify it, including Bob Lazar. His name's on that roster. But there's also hundreds of other people who claim they were there, and their name doesn't appear on the log. Now, I'm not going to say they're lying. I'm just going to say their name's not on the log. We're going to eventually publish this information here probably next year.
Interesting. Now that will certainly go in favor, you know, of Bob's claims,
Yes.
because there's still people out there who are still debating, is he or isn't he, you know? And I always thought he was, to be honest with you, because right from the early days when George Knapp brought it out, you know, I thought, well, you know, the conditions around this just a little bit unusual, would led me to believe, yeah, there was some authenticity there. And of course, he's always stuck to his guns. He never changed the story, always stuck to his guns.
Stuck to it.
And good on him.
And George Knapp wouldn't put somebody on, or wouldn't put so much belief in a person unless George did his own investigation.
Yeah.
And George Knapp has a lot of contacts out there.
Yes. Well, yeah. Oh, he knows that place
Yeah.
like the back of his hand. He really does.
Yes.
So where's it all happening now, do you think, Richard?
I think it's still happening
Is he still there in
there.
that location?
I don't know where Bob Lazar is.
No, I mean, do you think they're still working on those
Oh.
things at that facility?
Yes. They spent too much time and effort and money to build this massive underground facility.
Yeah, to walk away
To
from.
just walk away from it. So
Yeah.
yes, tests are still being conducted above ground and underground, and also over near Tonopah Air Force Base, which is northwest of Groom Lake.
Wow.
While working under General Trudeau, Corso says he was given the assignment of evaluating and exploiting pieces of alien material, which Corso was told came from a crashed saucer in New Mexico. Among the items he says he saw and handled were a piece of metal with really unique properties. The atoms, he said, were all aligned. He said it had a hardness and strength which could not be duplicated by human technology. He said he saw a charred computer chip. he saw photographs and reports concerning autopsies performed on alien bodies. He was told the autopsies had been conducted in a special facility at Walter Reed Hospital. I've been at this for about 10 years now, a pretty big chunk of my life, but not nearly as long as a lot of people have. The modern UFO era is going on for 50 years or so, and I can't think of hardly any conclusions that we can all agree on. What are these visitors? What do they represent? Where are they from? Why are they here? All the big central questions. We don't agree on those. So much for emerging science. That what we do have is a lot of bickering, a lot of nastiness, a lot of infighting. The problem, as I said, is ufologists. We have no shortage of semi-important or important-sounding topics, things like we got a face on Mars, we've got a clever little demon named a chupacabra that only seems to pop up where people speak Spanish, we've got more angels you can shake a stick at, we've got horny reptilian aliens going after our Earth women all over the place, but we don't have a whole heck of a lot of answers. I know a few years ago, Whitley Strieber, who I consider more of a writer and a thinker than a ufologist. I don't think he'd like that term of ufology. He turned his back on the whole field and walked away. I'm glad that he's back speaking and writing about topics and his experiences, but he just got tired of what he was subjected to, and for him it was on an international scale. Jacques Vallée, who in my opinion is probably the most important person to ever take up this topic, did the same thing. He just got burnt out on ufology and ufologists, and basically you don't see him at these conferences anymore. Now, when it comes to UFOs, it seems to me that people who jump onto bandwagons one way or another often end up with a rusty nail in their butts. There's no shortage of examples. And you can call it disinformation, you can call it infighting or whatever, but we just don't seem to be making a whole heck of a lot of headway. Billy Meyer's amazing photos of those beam ships. I remember seeing them so many years ago before I ever knew anything about this topic. Wow. And some of those early photographs, they looked incredible. They still do. Some of the later photographs clearly looked fake. Well, for people, you're either in one camp or the other. Either they're all fake or they're all real. The truth, however, may be somewhere in between. We forget that there were a lot of other independent witnesses who weren't part of Meyer's cult who saw these beam ships, or at least said they did. We also forget that we had a lot of people that infiltrated his group that had varying motives, journalists included, undercover journalists. Wouldn't be too hard to discredit a slightly kooky one-armed farmer. What about the MJ-12 document? Same sort of a thing. They're filled with things that just invite criticism. Inconsistencies in the type style and all that stuff that's been criticized. But at the same time, intriguing information that really rings true, and that seemingly could not have come from sources other than legitimate inside sources. Gulf Breeze, 3 kinds of viewpoints there. These are real photos of real UFOs. Ed Walters faked the whole thing, or it's the government playing mind games with a gullible public. I don't know whether Ed Walters ever experimented with fake photographs, but I sure strongly suspect that story about the model in a former house of his was bogus. Yet we tend to, we fall in one camp or another. We either throw it out or accept it all. Crop circles. Those early crop circles with the patterns that have not been duplicated by folks, and the changes in the chemical composition of the plants and the soil that can't be duplicated. And yet, even Colin Andrews admits today 75% of all the crop circles he's seeing in England each year are man-made. Individuals and organizations, for whatever reason, muddying the waters again. And the world press, my colleagues in journalism, tend to throw the whole thing out. The Roswell case itself, the alien autopsy film, same thing. Tidbits of information that seem tantalizingly true, and yet you fall into one camp or another and throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's a mess. The truth is, I hate to say this, but I just don't follow this scene as much as I used to. I don't log onto the net to check out the latest rumors. I generally do not attend UFO meetings or conventions anymore. I occasionally produce a story or a commentary in Las Vegas alone, but it's not nearly anything like the previous efforts and documentaries that took almost all of my time. I don't watch sightings anymore unless I'm flipping around the channel and there it is. I don't go through the TV guide at the beginning of the week and circle the things I need about UFOs that I need to tape, which I used to do. I do watch the X-Files, but heck, a lot of people watch the X-Files. The simple fact is I have tried hard to kick my UFO habit. It's not quite cold turkey. It's more like what you'd compare to Nicotrol or a UFO light. I don't mainline the MUFON Journal anymore. I don't sit out in the desert night after night, looking for UFOs and strange things in the sky. I don't collect ufologist trading cards anymore. I don't return long-distance calls, as many people have pointed out to me, from people I don't know who just want to talk about UFOs in general or whatever. I don't. It's still an addiction. It always will be. But I find myself devoting a lot more time to having a life, being normal, going to work, having a job, doing stories about things that are important to my community. I still pursue leads about Area 51 once in a while, which we'll talk about tonight. I have been involved in trying to verify the claims and the background of Colonel Corso, which we'll also talk about. I'm also still absorbing mountains of information that we've brought back from not one but two trips to Russia. We're back there in '96 again, which we'll also get to tonight. But life, I think, is too short to deal with the Bill Coopers, the New World Order conspiracy nuts, the underground vats of alien parts in bubbling cauldrons, the secret treaties that let aliens abduct us, the paranoid fringe cases, the neo-religious zealots, and all the rest. And unfortunately, in the eyes of everyone else, you and I in this room, we're all those people. We're all nuts. Even the straight arrow, no-nonsense, by-the-book researchers who really want to find the truth, earnest people like yourselves who want to get to the bottom of this, we're all nuts. I had the pleasure of seeing this. This is a Las Vegas publication. You probably can't see it, but they've got on the front page here, it's something of a likeness of me. My head looks even fatter than it does in person, and I'm riding in a flying saucer, and the basic gist of the article is, get out of town. We're tired of this UFO crap. Get out of town. I'm a terrible reporter, and that's enough of that. I haven't done a UFO story in Las Vegas, a series, since February of last year, but I'm the UFO guy. As I suspect each of you have your own circle of friends and family, you're the UFO person in your circle. I empathize with you. I can't tell you. For me, I'm a public person, so it gets a little bit of a wider hit in Las Vegas. A couple of editorial cartoons in the state's biggest newspaper. One that had me with the first one had me with a butterfly net chasing a flying saucer, and they had one where these. It didn't show me, but it had these alien hitmen who had come to Earth. It was called the Marshmallow Head Chronicles. And I had done a series on abductions, and these alien hitmen were coming to get me because I was spilling the beans, and they had their ray guns looking at two gasoline pumps, and they were, yes, of course they are Earthmen, but which one is George Knapp? They were going to rub me out. The media critic, he wrote that, people are rushing home to see my UFO stories, not because they're interested in little green men, but because they want to be there when I go bull goose loony right on the air. I don't need this. I don't need this. I'm trying to have a life. So I have tried to place a little bit of a distance between myself and the field, but still I am working behind the scenes on some topics that I hope will be of mutual interest, and these too have been sullied by various ufologists in this emerging science. Philip Corso is one of them. You've all heard of him by now. Mentioned a couple of times earlier. I think he really is an important new source of information on this topic, one of the highest-ranking UFO whistleblowers ever. Certainly the only UFO whistleblower that I can think of that ever worked at the White House. Predictably, though, there was some overhyped promotion for his book, and boy, ufologists just couldn't wait to get their knives into him. I first met Phil Corso in 1992, before anybody in the ufology field had ever heard of him, before anybody in the ufology field had ever met him. A friend of mine, his name is Mark Sauter. He's a journalist who now works for a program called American Journal. He was working on a book about POWs, prisoners of war who'd been abandoned after the Korean War. And he ran into Colonel Corso, and in the course of interviewing him about that topic, learned about the UFO stuff. I also got to meet him through Mark Sauter. We were talking about this a book deal at the time. For various reasons, the book was never written, but I continued to have occasional correspondence with him and talk to Colonel Corso. He had asked me to keep quiet about it. about what he had told me, and I did, until the hype about his book started coming out. Well, just before, about a year before that happened, myself and some colleagues went back to see him and got an update on what he'd been up to, got a lot of videotape of him. Subsequently, I've been able to interview him again, and I'm impressed by the guy. While working under General Trudeau, Corso says he was given the assignment of evaluating and exploiting pieces of alien material, which Corso was told came from a crashed saucer in New Mexico. Among the items he says he saw and handled were a piece of metal with really unique properties. The atoms, he said, were all aligned. He said it had a hardness and strength which could not be duplicated by human technology. He said he saw a charred computer chip. He saw photographs and reports concerning autopsies performed on alien bodies. He was told the autopsies had been conducted in a special facility at Walter Reed Hospital. Corso and Trudeau farmed out this material, they say, to private labs, to government research labs, hinted to them that this had come from some sort of advanced Russian plane that had crashed, although without spelling it out, and told them to go to work and figure out what this stuff was. It can certainly be shown he is who he says he is, he worked where he says he worked, and that he was certainly easily qualifies as one of the highest-ranking UFO whistleblowers in history. However, Corso admits there is no paper trail to prove any of the UFO-related research ever took place. He told me in 1996 that it was imperative the information be kept close to the vest so the operation wasn't discredited or co-opted by others in the Pentagon or others in the government. What makes him credible to me is that he's told incredible stories before and has been proven right. I told you that the guy who introduced me to him was investigating a book about POWs. 3 times Colonel Corso has testified before Congress on POW issues, and at the time he made his testimony, the things he was saying seemed absolutely incredible, that we had left men behind, that there had been a secret war underway where we were overflying Soviet airspace and our pilots had been shot down. Those things are now a matter of historical record. At the same time, before he was testifying, he was thoroughly checked out by the FBI, by congressional staffers as well. My congressional sources have told me that, and some of my colleagues that have traveled around the country to see former friends and fellow officers of his, that he gets nothing but glowing reviews from everyone. They all confirm that he and General Trudeau were very close, that they kept things close to the vest, and they also have said that Colonel Corso talked about this UFO stuff for many years. So, I tend to give him a lot of leeway. The ufological community, however, does not. Before Corso's book was even out, long before his book was out, ufologists were already taking pot shots. There's an English guy named Armand Victorian, and he seems to specialize in these hit pieces. He started putting out stuff that Colonel Corso could be linked to segregationist Strom Thurmond. Wow. Senator Thurmond probably was a segregationist at one point in his political career. He probably had to be to get elected. Doesn't mean he is one now. And as I recall, he's the chairman of Armed Services and has served longer in the United States Senate than any person in American history. So being linked to him, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Later, critics of Corso complained that Senator Thurmond had turned on him. Now, first he was too close to Thurmond, and then they're griping and bitching and moaning because Thurmond was backing away from him. What Thurmond had done is withdraw his foreword to Corso's book. There's a lot of internecine politics behind this, but I'll just tell you, the way that his critics are pointing it is that Thurmond had no idea this was going to be about UFOs. He was shocked, absolutely shocked when UFOs were mentioned in the book, and that's why he pulled it back. Well, Thurmond knew all about it. His staff knew all about it because people that I know have interviewed him about it before the book came out. What it was is sort of an embarrassment for him when it started getting a whole lot of press, and some of the staff members, some of his senior political advisors, has not been in on the decision to okay that forward for the book, so they had it pulled. Anyway, don't read too much into that. One of the Roswell gurus blew off Corso because he supposedly claimed to be a member of MJ-12. Absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. Some articles noted he was part of a secret society, and this is the first one for me, the Shikshini Knights of Malta. The Shikshini Knights of Malta, according to columnists from back in the 50s, were ex-military officers who were deeply suspicious of the CIA. Who is it, A recent issue of Saucer Smear notes that Corso is in a legal fight with Hollywood agents. Look at this guy. He's fighting with Hollywood agents. He's in a lawsuit with Hollywood. He's probably the first person to ever come to Hollywood and get in a fight with the studios or agents, isn't he? What isn't known is that Corso, at least the people I know close to him, has basically been robbed. You know, his book was on the bestseller list for 8 weeks, and it's been, you know, all over the place. He's got all kinds of publicity. He's got dime one from the book. He claims that there was, apparently the story that's come out now is that there were a contract that he was shown, but there were pages that weren't in it. So I heard that Mr. Burns, his co-author, is going to be speaking here at some point. You folks, if you're going to attend that thing, you might want to ask him about how that deal worked out, because that's the source of the lawsuit. Phil Klass has just come out with his newsletter. He notes that in the book there are many exaggerations, many errors in Corso's book. There are errors. I happened to see the original manuscript, and while the claims were fantastic and incredible and sensational, a lot of the stuff that turned out in this book was not in that first one. Now, I don't know where it came from, but it didn't come from Colonel Corso, because some of the exaggerations about the impact on technology were not in the first one. Some of the inaccuracies, little picky things that only Phil Klass can dig out, where the headquarters, the 8th Army Air Force really was, what base it was. You know, those are errors, but I don't know where they came from. I will tell you that Colonel Corso, I found him to be a charming and articulate man with a pretty good memory and a feisty spirit. It has been a long time since some of these events happened, so maybe memory could cloud it a bit. Perhaps an overzealous ghostwriter could murk up the waters a little bit. But again, as with crop circles, as with Billy Meyer, as with MJ-12, I caution you not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm not here to tell you that everything that Colonel Corso says is true, but a lot of it rings true. And I consider him to be an important new source of information. So, at the worst, keep an open mind in regard to him. Now, the way he's been treated is not something unknown to me, especially in dealing with Area 51, as you might imagine. You talk about your knee-jerk reactions, conspiracies, and disinformation. Area 51 certainly comes to mind. You know, I remember getting to sit in on a preview of the summer blockbuster Independence Day. And we're sitting there and watching the movie, and they get to the point where the president is informed, hey, there really is an Area 51. And this is in Las Vegas, so everybody's pretty hip to this topic. And these guys in front of me are going, see, I told you there's an Area 51. And it's like, you know, why you needed a Hollywood blockbuster to confirm this stuff, I don't know, but it was a humorous moment. You know, today Area 51 is the subject of movies and documentaries and network features and newspaper stories and magazine covers, talk shows, internet chatter, tabloid fantasies, and UFO debates. Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, Aviation Week, the New York Times, the Washington Post, 60 Minutes, NBC, ABC, Larry King, Nippon, the BBC, Italian, German, Australian networks, Entertainment Tonight, Hard Copy, A Current Affair, Unsolved Mysteries, Sightings, Encounters, The Paranormal Borderline, Geraldo, Montel Williams, Art Bell, Chuck Harder, The X-Files, and dozens of less influential media outlets have chronicled the rise of a veritable Area 51 cottage industry, including a research center and a viewer's guide, the Alien, t-shirts and posters and buttons and bumper stickers, videos and satellite images, and even, as we're going to see in a couple of minutes, a Bob Lazar Christmas ornament. Now, ladies and gentlemen, 15 years ago, Groom Lake was not even a burp on our collective radar screen. True, there were some sporadic reports over the years in Las Vegas newspapers about this base out there, along with some oblique references in certain UFO circles. If you recall, Falcon and Condor talked a little bit about a secret base in Nevada, and there was something called the Aquarius document floating around. But few people outside of Nevada or the inner circles of ufology had ever heard of the place. 3 things changed that. First, in 1984, the U.S. military initiated the illegal seizure of 89,000 acres of public land around Groom Lake. Just took it and later asked for permission to take it. Second, a UFO researcher named John Lear started touting his belief that alien technology was being stored and tested out there. And third, Bob Lazar admitted his involvement in the secret effort to back engineer alien technology at a facility near Groom Lake. For better or worse, considering how everything has turned out. I was instrumental in bringing all three of those developments to the attention of a larger public. And in light of all the folklore and fantasy and absolute nonsense and profiteering and distortion and invective which have emerged as a result of those initial news reports, I don't think it's exactly an achievement to brag about, but it is mine nonetheless. Concerning UFO allegations, there are some things that we can conclude, I think, with some reasonable certainty. Saucer-shaped craft have been witnessed at or near that facility since the 1950s. More than 24 former or current employees have told me as much over the years. A much smaller number of witnesses claim to have seen alien beings at the base. Odd, glowing craft have been photographed and videotaped in the vicinity of Area 51. That much is true. Last year I did a couple of update stories on Area 51 for anyone in the audience who's not familiar with the base or with Bob Lazar, and maybe we can roll that tape right now.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs.
The interview that launched 1,000 business ventures. Bob Lazar's 1989 claims that he saw flying saucers housed and tested near Groom Lake caused ripples which are still being felt. At least 4 movie projects, dozens of screenplays, a few books, t-shirts and bumper stickers, artwork, a rock band, a Las Vegas bar, a viewer's guide, a research center, countless news reports, even a Bob Lazar Christmas ornament. Not bad for a place that until last year didn't officially exist. The military now admits what the world already knew. It has a, quote, operating location, Lake. But the Pentagon says the base has no name. By denying the place has a name, the Defense Department hopes to stall a lawsuit filed by former workers who claim they were exposed to toxic chemicals there. The lawyer who filed the suit thinks it's ridiculous.
You just can't have black places. You can't have places that don't exist. The government cannot create these secret enclaves in which it and it alone determines what laws will govern.
Despite official denials, the common name for the base has always been Area 51. We recently found this 1967 government map which lists that name. Subsequent maps left the name blank. We also found a 70s newspaper article in which the Pentagon mentions Area 51 by name. What's it called today? High-level sources say the military uses the term score event to refer to it. Who runs the base? The CIA built it for use in the U-2 program. This is rare footage taken from Groom Lake of some early tests. Current warning signs indicate it's an Air Force facility, but all branches of the military have used it, along with most major defense contractors. The common thread has always been EG&G, which has had the contract to operate the facility since the beginning. What goes on there today? Plenty. Highly placed sources say the base employs about 1,800 people. One of their main missions is to evaluate Russian defense systems, equipment that's in the hands of unfriendly nations like Iran and Iraq. Another program at 51 is the stealth helicopter, although the technology isn't far along. As for flying saucers, the military admits it has built these unmanned craft. It may not be a coincidence that the Air Force's only unmanned aerial vehicle squadron is based at Nellis. Whatever's flying around out there still attracts visitors from all over the world. It's still newsworthy in Europe?
Yes. No, also in Europe, Area 51 is well known.
Lazar said he saw 9 flying discs of alien origin hidden in hillside hangars.
There were 9 total that I saw, each one being different. Like they had the assortment pack.
Lazar's controversial statement set off a stampede that continues to this day. People come by the busload to Groom Lake to watch the skies.
This is a classic mothership appearance.
Nearby, the rustic town of Rachel became a UFO hotspot. The town's bar and grill became the Little Ailey Inn, whose walls are adorned with alien drawings and poster-sized photos of the base. A full line of UFO merchandise, including videos, t-shirts, antimatter hats, and ET welcome mats, is for sale. Area 51 is off limits, but people still see weird lights in the sky.
Straight up!
Straight up.
Photos have captured glowing globs, sombrero-shaped craft, dual objects with rows of lights, things which make unusual maneuvers. A lawsuit by 6 former employees alleges the military endangered workers by illegally disposing of hazardous waste at Area 51. The government has used national security as grounds to stall the suit. It denied the base existed, denied it has a name, even denied having such hazardous materials as jet fuel and car batteries, although both jets and cars have been photographed there, as seen in this previously classified film. President Clinton recently signed an order exempting the base from environmental laws, but the lawyer who filed the suit doesn't think it will matter in the long run.
This lawsuit that's going on with the workers who have filed this stuff is maybe as important in the long run, and we're not going to get into it tonight, but maybe as important in the long run as the UFO stuff allegations out there, because the things that the government has done to its own workers, when it could have kept this thing quiet just by taking care of them, giving them medical attention, is absolutely unbelievable. And the things that they have done in court to thwart any kind of scrutiny of just what's going on, you wouldn't believe it. KLAS, at my urging, joined as part of this lawsuit back when it was before a federal judge in Nevada. It has since gone to the Ninth Circuit, where it's been a mixed bag and is going to be appealed to the whole Ninth Circuit, not just a 3-judge panel. But at each step of the way, the government attorneys have been allowed to have behind-the-scenes meetings with the judge at which the other side is not present. And they present something to the judge, and in each of these cases so far, the judge has sided with the idea of government secrecy. I mean, some of it is so incredibly ridiculous. The government says it would endanger national security to reveal that there is gasoline or jet fuel out at that base, at a jet base. I'll tell you, if the Russian spies can't figure that out, then I don't think we have a whole heck of a lot to worry about from them. Anyway, that's a subject for another time. Back to Lazar. I think we can say with some kind of believability that disc-shaped craft have been flying around out there for a long time. Bill Hamilton, who was up here before I was, is one of the guys who's really done some solid work on proving that over the years, and for that deserves a lot of credit. I think it's also true that there are no flying saucers at or near Groom Lake today. There are no alien beings at Area 51. There are no vast underground facilities at the base, nor are there any hangars built into the hillsides of Papoose Lake. 3 witnesses I know of with tied to congressional sources have been to the base in the past 3 years for inspections. I've even briefed them before and after about what to look for, where to go. The hangars are not there. Whether they were ever there or not is a question that we can debate forever, but they're not there now. And plus, I think it would just make no sense for the military to hide aliens or alien technology when millions of people all over the world suspect as much, and thousands of them make the trek into the desert to try to check it out for themselves. Conclusions about Bob Lazar are tougher to reach. People tend to fall into one camp or another, like all these other ufological questions we've been talking about. And they religiously stick to their views, no matter what evidence is presented to the other side. And I will have to admit that I'm a little guilty on that score myself. There are doubters who constantly brag about their diligence in exposing Lazar's lack of credentials, especially his lack of educational credentials. Let me just remind everyone that in the very first report that we ever broadcast about Bob Lazar, we said he cannot prove these credentials. We cannot find a single professor, we can't find a classmate, we can't find a diploma, we can't prove it. So people who, and Stan Friedman, friend of mine, constantly bragging about, I'm the guy who brought down Bob Lazar. It's almost part of Stan's name now. Hi, I'm Stan, the guy who brought down Bob Lazar Friedman. Constantly harangues on this point, and it's the baby with the bathwater thing. If he doesn't have credentials, can't prove he went to school anywhere, throw it all out. Well, I'm not sure that that's how I would treat it. Criticisms of Lazar's story are many, and many are very well deserved. He is lackadaisical about documentation. He is indifferent to whether anyone, including friends of his, believe him or not. He is uncooperative, especially to anyone associated with ufology. In fact, I taped an interview this afternoon before I got on the plane with him, just to have a special greeting to you folks. It was like pulling teeth, but we might see that a little bit later. He seemingly has little interest in helping anyone to prove his story one way or another. There are a lot of gaps. There are a lot of things in his story that don't make sense. But I think a lot of it makes too much sense to just completely dismiss it. For me and for KLAS TV, when we started out way back when in 1989 working on this stuff, the key to his story was always Los Alamos lab. Did he work at the lab? If he worked at the lab and he worked on classified projects, it at least made sense that he could also be tabbed to work on a program in Nevada. So that's where we started. And I don't know if you know the history of this stuff, but the rigmarole that we went through with the lab lasted several years, and we never really did get solid answers out of him. Proving he ever worked at Los Alamos has just been nearly impossible. At first, they denied that they had ever heard of him before when I contacted him. Later, I produced a copy of the lab phone book that had his name in it, and they just kind of hemmed and hawed. I produced a copy of the Los Alamos newspaper that had him listed as a lab physicist. They kind of hemmed and hawed, still said they had no records. After countless phone calls and letters in a couple of years, I finally got the lab to tell me by phone that they'd found an ID number for him. But that he didn't work for them. He worked for a subcontractor called Kirkmeyer. Kirkmeyer proved to be even less cooperative than Los Alamos. At first, I got a guy on the phone, a supervisor, who told me, yeah, we've got records on Lazar. Yeah, you can have them. Weeks went by. I didn't hear from him, didn't get the records. I keep writing, I keep calling. My letters were unanswered. They refused to take my phone calls. Lazar had told me that Kirkmeyer was a scientific headhunter company. They'd fill technical and scientific jobs at government labs. Surely a company that makes its living by filling these kinds of positions would hang on to records of people that they send out to national labs. But apparently not, because finally Kirkmeyer said, well, we threw those records away. It's too much time. We don't keep them that long. Lazar's critics formally complained, well, he was never at Los Alamos. Now they say even if he was there, well, maybe he's working as a janitor, not on classified stuff. This is the kind of reason that Lazar doesn't like to cooperate with ufologists. He feels the critics would never be satisfied. If he proves he works at the lab, they say it doesn't prove he had a clearance. If he could prove he worked on classified programs, they say it still doesn't prove he was at S4. So if he could prove that, it still wouldn't prove he worked on UFOs. So what's the point, is what he says. For the sake of argument, I think it can be proven that Lazar did work on classified projects in New Mexico. I've interviewed 3 lab employees who remember him, who say he was a physicist and that he worked on classified programs. Joe Vaninetti is the name of one of those guys. He worked at Los Alamos. He's listed in the same lab phone book with Lazar. He later worked on the nuclear testing program in Nevada. He says Lazar is telling the truth. The other 2 employees agree, but they didn't want their names used. Now, what do the critics do with these guys? They ignore them. Well, he doesn't have a diploma, so he couldn't have been there. For example, he knew when and where flights of disc-shaped craft would take place. He took people out there 3 or 4 weeks in a row. They got videotape of it. You just saw some of it. How did he know? I think there's a new book out called Dreamland, if you've read this thing. It's pretty nasty, and we'll talk about that if you want to in the Q&A afterward, but it suggests, well, maybe he was just running around. He was running around in the desert and found it out for himself. John Lear was running around for 20 years on Area 51 stuff. He never saw any of these things. It was Lazar who took him out there, told him what night they were going to take place and where they could see him from. And he did it again and again. How did he know? Lazar passed a polygraph exam. Now, there's a lot of people who seem to dispute this thing. They say it was inconclusive. This book, for one, that I talked about, it's inconclusive. Well, it's not inconclusive. I first asked him to take this test. He didn't hesitate a bit. We took him to a guy, a polygrapher, who spent all of like 10 minutes getting ready. Now, Bob was nervous about it. He was nervous because there had been threats on his life. Allegedly, there had been one attempt on his life. They had put guns to his head. They had done things to his head. They had shot him up with strange stuff, made him drink strange substances, and he was obviously nervous. Well, this guy, he did 2 tests on him. Wham, bam. The first one he thought, well, he might be deceptive. The second one he said, this is inconclusive. He suggested, the polygrapher suggested, that we try another guy. The guy we tried is a polygrapher named Terry Tavernetti, and he runs a corporate security operation for a major Las Vegas hotel. He's a former Orange County police officer. He's an experienced and licensed polygrapher. He took his time with Bob, got to know him, went through the story, went through the questions, put him through the tests, and he says, and Tavernetti says to this day, even talking about it, he got chills as he was going through the test because he realized this guy is not lying. Bob Lazar passed that test. Tavernetti in fact, he passed 4 of them. Tavernetti gave the results to another polygrapher who agreed. No question, there's no deceit. Another guy, they passed it on just as a double check, and the guy said, well, maybe he's relating something that someone else told him. Just as a maybe. And then someone else said, maybe we should have more tests, a 4th polygrapher. But the guy who did the tests, 4 of them, said he passed. People blow that off. The people who don't want to hear it, blow it off. I don't think it's fair to do so. I mean, anyone who knows this guy knows that he is a rebel, he's a loner, he is an anti-authority guy, he has a penchant for racing jet cars on city streets, he fires off machine guns, he stages these outlaw fireworks shows every year in the desert that are a real hoot. This is all true. On his house, he has a pirate skull and crossbones flag over his house. This is the kind of guy he is. So it is not unusual to say that he could get involved in something like this. Why would the Navy hire somebody like that for a secret program? One possible answer comes to mind. A lot of his critics don't like it, but if it fits, you wear it. I mean, he might have been the kind of person they were looking for, someone who is technically qualified, but who could be discredited if necessary. Or maybe the discrediting the thing was the whole purpose all the way along. That was what they had in mind as a way to discredit the whole idea of UFOs at Area 51 or anywhere else. You know, the story told by Bob is consistent with the stories told by a lot of other people dating back almost 40 years, consistent with a lot of what we know about Roswell and other alleged crashes. If you take Lazar out of the Area 51 story, it's still a story. There are too many other witnesses who have claimed knowledge of the program, but if you keep him in the story, and if you can discredit him, you kind of wide swath across all ufology. You cast doubt on the crash saucer theory. You forever wipe out the silly rumor about UFOs in the Nevada desert. You get in a shot at MJ-12 and the secret government while you're at it, and you scare the dickens out of anyone else who might be willing to come forward and talk about secret programs that they've worked on, which is exactly how Lazar's legal troubles have been interpreted by other people who work on those kinds of projects in Nevada. And I know because they've told me. And in this sense, the people who suspect the Area 51 story to be disinformation may be partially correct. But if so, the disinformation didn't originate with Bob. It didn't originate with John Lear, as some have suggested. By picking Bob for this program and letting him see these documents and messing with his mind, they had a perfectly built-in safety valve. Discredit him, you give the mainstream press another reason to vilify UFOs. You give various UFO luminaries an excuse to attack it as well. You give the lunatic fringe something to embrace and embellish, which they have done with great vigor at Area 51. You know, the milk carton kids are all taken out there now for secret experiments. And you almost guarantee that no official in his right mind will ever get anywhere near this mess to find out what's really going on. We have another tape. This is something I taped a while back. About Bob Lazar. You know all the rumors that people tell about him. He's dead. He's running a drug lab. I asked him to put this on tape and let you know that he's okay. He's alive and well and live in Las Vegas, and here it goes.
I've been underground. People have been hiding me out, shifting from hideout to hideout, and the government's been on my tail. I've been killed. You've been killed. You name it. I've heard unbelievable stories. Radiation detection is one of the things that I spend my time with, and I design, repair, and sell different types of radiation detectors. In fact, one of the things people thought I did was develop film badges. I don't know where they came up with that idea, but I don't do that. The main problem I have with the UFO community is number one, here are people that essentially their income is derived from UFOs. And that's the number one thing I have problems with. So essentially for them to make money and support themselves, they have to come up with ridiculous stories, or at least prove that they're at the forefront of knowledge. You're dealing with a bunch of people that are essentially a collection of psychics, astrologers, people that believe every other person on the earth is an alien, that there's reptilians and all these different species that live underground, aliens that walk around the street and just hassle people to annoy them. Believe me, I'm not part of that. I don't deal with those people, and that's essentially what happened with Jacques Vallée when he came down here. Wanted to know the UFO story. He came down with his movie producers, and his theory has been spacecraft or from other dimensions and things like that. And I essentially laid it out. Well, this is essentially what I was exposed to, and how the crafts work and things like that. It has nothing to do with other dimensions, and ever since then, Jacques hasn't had a very high opinion of me. But that's essentially carried throughout the UFO community. If you contradict what they say, again, they make their income off of something like that, so they have to be the ones that know what's going on.
A lot of attacks on you personally, a lot of attacks on the story, a lot of disbelief.
media people, UFO people. You stick by the story here now. It's been a couple of years.
Absolutely. It's coming up on 4 years. That's what happened.
It's interesting that nobody from the military, nobody representing Nellis or any of those folks have ever said anything about it.
They probably can't. There hasn't been much word officially on it at all. In fact, I don't think there's been much word officially as far as denial. They just say they have no comment.
Right. Any progress over the last ensuing couple of years in verifying parts of your background? Are you still actively pursuing that?
No, I don't actively pursue that at all. People think I'm essentially a researcher, chase UFO stories or, gather information. I have nothing whatsoever to do with it. Now, before I became involved in the project, I was one of the greatest disbelievers on Earth. I mean, I'm sure I could have topped Phil Klass. I would have had nothing to do with it. And essentially, other than the equipment and technology that I was exposed to, I really don't carry my beliefs much further than that.
You think those UFOs or those flying saucers or the discs, the equipment that you said you saw, are still out there?
I doubt that equipment is still there. There's been so much coverage. There are so many people looking into that area, and civilian and otherwise, that they had ample time to move things. And where it is, I don't know, but I find it difficult to believe that anything's still going on.
Okay, go right.
You know about the new one, right? Apparently you, I, John Lear are all Shriners or 32nd level Masons, whoever they are. There are no aliens. That it is the Shriners that actually have the flying saucer technology, and we came up with the alien story to confuse the public, and I don't remember the rest of the story, but it's really exciting.
That's the end of the tape. So next time you go to a parade and you see the Shriners in those funny hats and little cars. As I was saying, the message oozing out of Groom Lake is sort of what led me to start thinking about Russia. Because clearly we were not getting any kind of breakthroughs from our government. I know a lot of us hope that someday the government's going to open up the doors and the saucers are in there and go ahead and take a peek. But I don't see it happening. It doesn't, at least from what's happening in Nevada, it doesn't seem to be a trend in that direction. So I started thinking about Russia. In 1993, I was fortunate enough to slip through a window of opportunity in Russia. The political climate was just right, allowing for unprecedented access to previously hidden information about UFOs and a lot of topics. A lot of people were going over there gaining access to classified stuff. I said afterward that after 1993, that first trip, that I feared that the window of opportunity might close. And in 1996, I returned to Russia, and my fears were confirmed, although not for the expected reasons. The window, I would say, is not closed all the way, but it's stuck. And I think it's going to take a tremendous effort one way or another to get it to move. I took this most recent trip at the invitation of a British broadcasting crew. They wanted to put together a documentary, and they weren't satisfied with just staying in Moscow. We traveled the length and breadth of the country, and I love Russia, but I'm not sure I'm ready to go back there anytime soon. If you want to cue up the, not D, but E, the E tape. The American CIA funds something called the Foreign Broadcast Information Service. This service monitors foreign newspapers and media reports and then summarizes them for consumption by U.S. intelligence agencies. The FBI's reports are not classified, but they are not widely accessible. Still, there have been some references in Western press and in UFO circles to some of the most interesting incidents that have been summarized by this intelligence gathering service. In 1993, I was unsuccessful in attempts to contact the most important players that were mentioned in some of these cases, but this time around, things worked out, if you want to roll the tape. This distinguished-looking man is named Igor Maltsev, Colonel General Maltsev. For 7 years, he was the chief of staff of the entire Soviet air defense. He was the #1 guy in the entire Russian Air Force. In March of 1990, General Maltsev's forces around Moscow encountered something of high strangeness. Maltsev collected all the data and sent a report to the Kremlin. The events were not reported in Russia for a full year and then were picked up later by the FBIS. To my knowledge, I'm the first American journalist to interview Maltsev about these events. According to his official report, there were more than 100 visual observations of UFOs in the Moscow area on a single night. The air forces were placed on alert, planes were scrambled, the objects were picked up on several radar in the air and on the ground. Warplanes attempted to get close to these things, but they couldn't. The speeds were described as many times greater than any known aircraft. The objects could appear and disappear at will. Now, this is the Russian military that's gathering this information. General Maltsev's report stated, quote, "I'm not a specialist on UFOs, but they seem completely devoid of inertia. They had somehow come to terms with gravity. The movement was without sound, with startling maneuverability. At present time, terrestrial machines could hardly have such capabilities." The original newspaper article about this report in Russia stated that General Maltsev's documents offer, quote, "substantial confirmation that UFOs, piloted by intelligent beings, have been visiting Russia." In our interview, General Maltsev was reluctant to take it much further. He conceded that the remarks attributed to him were accurately reported, that UFOs were truly unknown. He said there's no way that it could be stealth or some other advanced aircraft, but that's as far as he'd go. He said he had no knowledge of any other UFO incidents. He wasn't really interested in pursuing what happened further. Then he conceded that his forces had been given a standing order that UFOs are not to be fired upon because, quote, "they may have tremendous capacities for retaliation." In other words, they could kick our ass, I think. Besides, he says, his planes could not get close enough to do anything even if they wanted to. Now remember, this is the same Russian Air Force that when that guy Roost flew his biplane or whatever it was into the Kremlin. Oh, what was it? And they were all upset about that, but they don't care that there's 100 unidentified amazing machines flying over Russia. Don't shoot at them. Maltsev insisted that he was in a position to know just about everything about foreign incursions into Russian airspace. He's the boss. If it happened, he should know about it. Yet he claimed ignorance about a whole raft of other UFO cases, and we're going to roll the tape and take a look at some of them right now. First film you're going to see was something that was kept in a KGB vault for 25 years. It was finally obtained by ABC News with my assistance. The triangular object was spotted by a propaganda film shooting over Latvia in 1968. They estimated it was 7 miles up, so it had to be enormous. They scrambled planes to go after it. Before they got there, though, it went behind a cloud and, quote, disappeared. The resident Russian skeptic said, it's a French weather balloon, and it's true, the French did have weather balloons. Stop it for a second. Pause it. French did have weather balloons like that, but ABC checked, and no such balloons had been launched anywhere near that time period, anywhere in that area. Now you can roll the next one. This next one, May 1982, a military survey team working in the Kola Peninsula saw this spinning object. We slowed it down a little bit so you can get another look at it. I have seen similar drawings from other parts of the world, and to my knowledge, no one has come up with an explanation for that. Anyone got one? Jellyfish. Swamp gas. This next thing you're going to see is a fuzzy kind of a photo that was snapped in the Ural Mountains in 1976. The snapshot, as I said, is kind of fuzzy and doesn't really show much, as so many UFO photos don't. And the hunter later offered a more detailed drawing that he gave to the Russian Ministry of Defense, and that's where the files that I found. The man you're about to see is a decorated Russian pilot, a lieutenant colonel, who said he encountered a UFO and tried to intercept it. He told his superiors that the UFO, there he is, he told his superiors that the UFO shot out a beam of light which disabled his plane. He bailed out and survived and kept his mouth shut for several years. His story was finally told in a UFO magazine in Russia. The photo you're going to see is from Defense Archives. This MiG pilot said he had a mid-air collision with a UFO which damaged his wing. This next photo is of a brush fire that was taken by 3 Army officers who say the fire was sparked by a UFO that landed and then zoomed away. Not all that spectacular. Next one is 2 schoolboys at a town north of Moscow saw this UFO. They ran home, get a camera, came back, captured a series of 8 really kind of amazing photos. I didn't grill General Maltsev about any of these specific cases because it was pretty obvious to me that he wasn't going to tell me anymore. As he said repeatedly, he was in a position to know about this stuff, but he didn't. And so if he was telling the truth, it meant the information was routed elsewhere. If he wasn't being entirely truthful, it might be he had good reasons for not telling me the truth, and as I learned over the next few days of the 96 trip, both possibilities had merit. Following those first FBIS accounts about Maltsev's reports, there were follow-ups with even higher officials. The Deputy Minister of Defense, General Ivan Tretyak, Commander-in-Chief of Air Defense Forces and General of the Army, tried to throw a little cold water on a UFO mini-hysteria after these incidents. He told a newspaper that Maltsev's report was accurate. However, most UFO reports can be explained away as misidentifications. Then he admitted some of the UFOs had been photographed, that they could be seen visually and on ground radar, but not detected on airborne radar. He said if special Russian tracking stations were to be built, chances are the Russians would see a lot more of these objects. And he admitted that there is a standing order for Russian pilots to leave the UFOs alone. We made substantial efforts to get an interview with Minister Tretyak, both by phone during the trip and before. We finally spoke to him by phone, and he told us he'd already spoken about this matter. He couldn't understand why we wanted to ask about it. We said, we need video. We need video, dude. And he said, I'll check with the Ministry of Defense. He did. We called him back. He said that in their opinion, it's not in anyone's best interest to talk about this any further at this time, perhaps in a year or two, which is pretty much where we left it. Now, this is a far different attitude from what I encountered just a couple of years before. And it allowed me to set the stage a little bit what it was like in 1993. Our success hinged on basically one man. He's a Russian physicist named Dr. Nikolai Kapranov. He had been a national security advisor to the Russian parliament as well as to their Academy of Sciences. I met him in Las Vegas in 1992, started asking about UFOs, whether he knew anything over there. Nah, never given it any thought. And then as we had a beer or two, I do know a guy at KGB who talked about it. And I do know this guy and this guy, so we set him up with an office, said, go find it. And the main directive that we gave him, the one that really worked for us, was don't go to ufologists. Not that there's anything wrong with ufologists, but we'd like to find people who are in a position to know about this stuff, but who have never been interviewed before. No one who's been on hard copy, not Marina Popovich or any of these folks who are perfectly good sources of information. We wanted to find something new. And that's it's because of that rule, I think, it opened a lot of doors for us. In fact, it allowed us to gain access to Ministry of Defense files that no one has ever seen before. This study lasted for 10 full years. Thousands and thousands of reports poured in. He saw the best, and he shared them with us. Go ahead and roll this tape. We'll hear from Colonel Sokolov why the study had been undertaken in the first place.
The military was interested for three reasons. One, because of the unpredictable movement of the UFOs, the quick changes in course angles. Two, because of the velocity of the UFO movements. And three, because UFOs observed visually could not be seen on radar, and those seen on radar could not always be seen visually. The military thought that if the secrets of the UFOs could be discovered, they would be able to win the competition against our prospective enemies in terms of velocity, materials, and visibility. Stealth. To build their own stealth. Pilots recognized UFOs as a threat to them. There were 40 episodes in which they shot at UFOs. An order was given to pilots to chase UFOs and shoot at them. But when the pilots tried, the UFOs speeded up. In 3 cases, the pilots would lose control and crash. 2 of the pilots died. After that, pilots received a new order. When they see a UFO, change course and get out. All the pilots agreed. October 5th, 1983. I was ordered to immediately go to the Ukraine to an ICBM base. The reason for the urgency was a report from the base commander to the chief of the general staff. On October 4th, from 4 to 8 p.m., the base observed a UFO. At the same time, on the control panel, they received an order to prepare the launch of the ICBMs. The lights lit up, and the launch codes enabled the missiles. Dozens of officers witnessed this.
Colonel Sokolov added somewhat cryptically that the Ministry of Defense study of UFOs is still going on, although on a lesser scale, and that, quote, it's unlike the one in the United States. But he wouldn't say a whole lot more about that. All kinds of fascinating incidents from those files. I brought a lot of them here, but I can't think of a practical way to show them to everyone. The real significance, I think, though, of the Ministry of Defense file is not in the specifics of the individual cases, but rather in the scope of the overall study. I mean, this was Russia's Pentagon, which had ordered this long-term, comprehensive UFO study for the express purpose of exploiting what they considered to be alien technology. They wanted to build a stealth and kick our butt. We're not talking about ufologists here. We're talking about the Ministry of Defense, and that's very serious stuff. It was vitally important to the crew I was traveling with in 1996 to try to find Colonel Sokolov again. We wanted to interview him. I mean, he was the key witness for what they hoped to be their documentary. And I was curious as well as what had happened to him, because I knew that he had taken a beating in the Russian press after we came back, blabbed our mouths off in some ufological publications about what we had found. It got back to Russian UFO circles, and he took a terrible pounding. There were still communist-oriented newspapers there. There was a particular ufologist who was not interviewed by us and who was kind of miffed about it, who really took off on Colonel Sokolov and on some of the others who had helped us. Nikolai Kapranov, our friend, had told us if this had happened 5 years ago, if this had happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we would have been imprisoned. If this had happened 10 years ago, we would have been shot. And I had also heard that Colonel Sokolov had been having health problems, so in our first few attempts to reestablish contact with him, we were told he don't want to talk about UFOs anymore. And he didn't need any more heat, and besides, his health was not that good. Both things turned out to be true. Excuse me. We were never able to talk to him. He avoided us the whole time. We found out later that he had been admitted to a hospital. He is still alive, but not in very good health. Even more telling, though, in this trip, we were unable in 1996 to hook up with Nikolai, who'd become something of a friend of mine. We'd been corresponding for a period of 4 years, telephone conversations all the time, working on a real fun project. He wouldn't come to the phone. His family at first said he was gone, and then he just never hooked up. And I don't know to this day what the story was there. The idea that Russians are studying UFOs in order to learn stealth technology was intriguing to me because of the allegations about some kind of connection to stealth and UFOs that have been raised in connection with Area 51. Similar allegations have been raised about a connection to SDI or Star Wars technology. And through our contacts with the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, we interviewed a man named Dr. Ramily Avramenko, who was and perhaps is still one of the chief scientists working on Russia's anti-satellite weapons program, their version of SDI. He had the highest possible security clearances most of his adult life, so high that for most of his life, he wasn't even able to use his real name. If he wanted to publish something scientific, he had to use an alias. Dr. Avramenko told us in no uncertain terms, UFOs are real, that we, the Americans meaning, and the Russians have known they're real for decades, and that the information has been incorporated into SDI research. Roll the tape. SDI research. He even demonstrated what he said was a tabletop model of a plasma beam weapon for us. And I didn't think it was all that impressive, but other people... I'd seen this thing, this blue plastic thing sitting on the table and wondered what it was. And he pulls out the razor blade and puts it on top and gives us a little demonstration. I'm still not sure whether this is significant or not. If there's somebody scientific in the audience, they could tell us, but he showed us what it did. It wasn't plugged into anything either.
It is short.
Well, then he told us about UFOs.
The first time I saw UFOs was in 1959. I saw it with radar as it was orbiting Earth. In 1959, the first good radars were made. We could see several thousand kilometers. We could see what was happening around the Earth. At the time, satellites were easily countable, but we also saw vehicles whose technical characteristics we can't match even now. We saw tens of these in 1959, entering and leaving Earth's atmosphere. Surely the existence of these UFOs caused problems for the U.S. defense system. You were faced with separating aggressive vehicles from the unknowns. Are aliens and UFOs real? For me and my colleagues, that isn't even a question. I know this government has many programs on this. The information about UFOs helps us manufacture plasma beams for use in our Star Wars. The weapons of the aliens, we call them.
Both Dr. Avramenko and Colonel Sokolov told us the military studies of UFOs were still underway. And with the help of Nikolai, the first time around anyway, we met with a man who is still in charge of the ongoing study. We first had an agreement that we wouldn't use his name. but later he gave me the permission to do so, which is kind of incongruous with everything else we saw during the 96 trip. His name is Colonel Alexander Plaxon. He's an Air Force officer. Managed to get copies, with his help and Colonel Sokolov, of documents that are still classified, as opposed to a lot of the other stuff which has been declassified. Documents that are still classified about Russian UFO studies. What they reveal is this is an ongoing effort. It is high level. It is dead serious by the Russian military. In the documents, there are a lot of references to American ufology that makes me believe that they are monitoring developments in ufology around the world. It doesn't mean that they believe it's all real. It just shows that they're paying attention to it. It's not even a matter of discussion whether UFOs are real. Yes, they acknowledge many are misidentifications, but they're focusing on how these things work so they can apply it to military and perhaps later civilian technology. The name of the ongoing study in 93 was Thread 3. One enlightening section of papers dealt with Russian cosmonauts in space, and it also speculated on American astronauts. The Russians seem to think we ran into something on the moon, which is the reason that we didn't go back for so many years. They also detail Yuri Gagarin claimed that he had seen something in space and would speak about it more. His first guy in space would speak about it more if given permission. The second, according to these documents, the second guy in space, a cosmonaut Titov, took along a film camera, and he had a whole array of these devices that he could see outside the capsule dancing around. He brought back some film footage, and we got to see one frame of that film. It shows 7 brightly lit objects out there. Also in the classified documents, as I said, several references to things that were seen on the moon by U.S. astronauts and how the information had been removed from NASA's public files. We did meet with Colonel Plaxon this time, 1996 again. Thread 3 had ended, but another study called Group 22 had replaced it on a lesser scale. He says that he has not been told to be quiet. He's written even articles about anomalous lights as opposed to plasma balls as opposed to UFOs. We wondered how long these studies have been going on. Found another guy, one guy in the country who can answer that question. His name is Valery Budakov. Dr. Budakov has been mentioned subsequently in articles here in the West. He had been trained at, however, before we approached him, I don't think any other Western journalist had talked to him. He'd been trained at the Moscow Institute of Aviation, where the Russian space program was built. You want to know about the idea of crash saucers, whether or not, how the Russians view Roswell? This was a guy who had some answers. We can roll this tape. His mentor was a guy named Korolev, the father of the Russian space program, and he asked him, he come to speak to him about Stalin and UFOs.
Korolev told me that in 1948 he was invited to the Kremlin to see Stalin. This was after the events in New Mexico and after the death of Captain Mantell. Stalin brought Korolev into a room where all the materials were spread on a table. Western periodicals, books, articles, UFO reports from the Soviet Union, information from special channels in the U.S. Stalin wanted to know, what did Korolev think about the material concerning Roswell and UFOs? Korolev asked to take the materials home to study them and was told no. He had to work there. When Korolev finished the work, Stalin asked him again his opinion. Korolev said the phenomenon is real. They do not appear to be dangerous to our country. They are not manufactured in the States or any other country. And the time will come when it must be further studied. Stalin thanked him and said this same opinion was shared by other specialists. We know that the U.S. Air Force possesses plenty of material about UFOs. We know the U.S. Navy also has plenty of material. We know about special orders given to keep all of the material secret. When curious people ask for the materials, they are told they're not there. For the near future, the most interesting materials will be kept secret. The owners of the material don't let it out.
I know I'm going kind of fast on this, but I wanted to cover one more point. The question of other Roswells and other crashes. Those things, those kinds of stories had been floating around for a number of years. You want to switch tapes to the next one.
Now they have something new to debate, the Russian Roswell. George Knapp investigated the case during his recent trip to Russia.
From the port city of Vladivostok, an aging helicopter took us to the even more remote town of Dalnogorsk, known for its mines, its chemical plants, and the crash on Hill 611. In January 1986, hundreds of witnesses saw a round, red, glowing object before and during the crash. It flew parallel to the mountains, they say, then plunged into the ground, repeatedly bouncing up and down. Valery Dezhilny of the Russian Academy of Sciences was the first to reach the crash site. On the rocks and trees, he found metal fragments unlike those of any meteorite. Under examination, the debris revealed a complex pattern of netting. Most of the material was sent to Academy Institutes for analysis. The debris included several rare earth elements, but no trace of sulfur or phosphorus used in normal industrial processes. Dezhilny also found that flint at the crash site had somehow been magnetized. Something as likely as magnetizing brick, he says. His team report concluded outrageously the object was not made on Earth. The prevailing view among skeptics is that the object was a secret Russian satellite. However, the 11 institutes which studied the debris have never formally released their findings or the material. Military sources, including this lieutenant colonel, say there are no records indicating it was a Russian satellite. Dezhilny also notes that no one from the government ever came looking for their lost satellite, although the KGB office in Dalnogorsk did inquire about subsequent UFO sightings. Dozens of UFOs were seen in the weeks and months after the crash, objects which flashed spotlights toward the ground as if searching for something. Most residents saw them, and the general in charge of the Russian Air Force in the region said on television his forces had tracked some of the objects on radar. As in the U.S., there have been other debatable crash reports in Russia, but none with hundreds of living eyewitnesses and none with several pounds of unusual material. George Knapp, Channel 8 Eyewitness News.
This is a note of protocol. I told you it was a 9.5-hour flight from Moscow to Vladivostok, the most crime-ridden city in all of Russia. We flew out in the same storm system that killed Ron Brown, the Secretary of Commerce, hundreds of miles down to the south, but it's a complete whiteout. It was just nuts. 9.5 hours. They served us a dinner. It was chicken and rice and white wine. And then for breakfast, we're still on the plane. 9 hours later, they served us chicken and rice and red wine. So, just as a matter of, if you want to be couth in Russia, it's red wine with breakfast. Anyway, that was a fascinating trip. Dalnogorsk, a real garden spot up there next to North Korea and China, and north of Vladivostok. It was quite an experience. I'm not quite ready to go back. Try to summarize this stuff. You know, we were there in '93. And all the doors were open for us, and people were openly speaking about this. And in '96, without anyone telling them, it seemed like the pendulum had swung the other way, and people were, without any formal orders, and people were clamming up about UFOs, or they were singing a different tune. You know, when we were there in '96, Boris Yeltsin was, when we first got there, he was 20 points behind in the polls to his opponent. People were concerned the communists might return to power, so maybe the reluctance to get into any kind of stew was understandable. Boris Yeltsin won, but his health and his grip on power are very tentative, so that window of opportunity remains stuck. I think what we learned, though, is governments do know about UFOs. They are interested in them. They do share information. They do cooperate in a cover-up, probably out of their own desire for self-preservation. We know they're lying to us. We know that the Russian government is lying to the Russians, and the British government is lying to the British, and the American government is lying to us. And we look forward to the day when they publicly admit it, but I wouldn't hold our breath. I would just caution you, if I could say we learned anything here, I hope I've imparted, is that with this wild and wacky topic, you got to be skeptical. You have to be skeptical. But try to keep at least an open mind and a healthy kind of skepticism, and don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Thanks very much for having me here.